Today, we're going through an amazing book. How to Learn Almost Anything in 48 Hours by Tansel Ali. Meet Ethan, a man with an unquenchable thirst for learning new skills. But let's face it, life wasn't making it easy for him. Between the crushing pressure of his job, the need to pick up new skills, and endless household responsibilities, Ethan's life felt like a pendulum swinging between stress and time constraints. One evening, while sitting in his favorite cafe, Ethan's eyes landed on a book. The title caught him off guard. How to Learn Almost Anything in 48 Hours. His immediate reaction? Yeah, right. Learning takes months, not hours. But a line on the back cover made him pause. Master the art of learning and transform your life. Intrigued, Ethan bought the book and promised himself he'd start reading it first thing in the morning. The journey begins. The next morning, coffee in hand, Ethan opened the first chapter, titled Mastering Memory Techniques. The author, Tansel Ali, started with a bold claim. Memory isn't just a skill, it's an art. That line struck a chord. The chapter introduced a fascinating concept, the memory palace. At first, Ethan chuckled. A palace? What am I, royalty? But as he read on, he realized this wasn't about building castles in the air. It was a method to organize and store information in a way his brain would naturally remember. The key idea? Everyone has familiar spaces deeply etched in their memory, like their home, their school, or the route they take to work. By mentally associating new information with these spaces, you could create a sort of mind map. Intrigued, Ethan decided to try it. Building his memory palace. The book's first step was simple. Pick a place you know well. Ethan chose his apartment. He visualized every corner, the living room, kitchen, bedroom, adding as much detail as possible. The next step? Associate each location with the information you want to remember. Ethan decided to test this with photosynthesis. He imagined his couch as a giant green leaf absorbing sunlight. He closed his eyes and pictured it vividly, down to the rays of sunlight bouncing off the leaf. It felt odd at first, like something out of a movie. But he pushed through. Next, in his kitchen, he associated Newton's laws of motion with his dining table. He imagined an apple falling from the table, thinking, an object at rest stays at rest. Hours later, Ethan decided to test himself. During a walk, he asked himself, what is photosynthesis? Instantly, the image of the sunlit leaf couch popped into his mind. He asked himself about Newton's laws, and the falling apple was right there. It worked. It actually worked. Ethan felt like he'd discovered a superpower. The power of visualization. But Tansel Ali didn't stop at the memory palace. The book emphasized the power of visualization. The more vibrant and exaggerated your mental images, the easier they are to recall. That night, Ethan dreamed of standing in a grand palace, each room packed with knowledge. In the living room, towering green plants explained photosynthesis. In the kitchen, apples tumbled endlessly to illustrate Newton's laws. The dream was vivid, almost magical. And when Ethan woke up, he realized something profound. This technique wasn't just a gimmick, it was life-changing. What's next? Ethan's newfound excitement brought a question to mind. What happens when I need to learn a lot of information? He turned to the next chapter, speed reading and information absorption. The journey was just beginning. The book promised not just to teach, but to transform. Are you ready to unlock your potential and master the art of learning? Stay tuned for more insights from How to Learn Almost Anything in 48 Hours. How a book changed Ethan's life. Ethan had always been curious, but that day, when he picked up a book, he didn't realize his life was about to change. Within minutes of reading, he felt like he had unlocked a hidden world. The author started by saying, speed is the key to learning, but only if you balance it with comprehension. Ethan paused, thinking, that's true. What's the point of reading fast if you don't understand a thing? The first technique was minimizing subvocalization. The author explained that many of us silently repeat every word as we read, almost like we're whispering to ourselves. Ethan thought, wait, that's me. I do this all the time. To break this habit, the author suggested a simple trick: use your finger like a pointer while reading. This keeps your eyes focused on the text, allowing your brain to process words directly without whispering them in your mind. Skeptical but curious, Ethan decided to try it. At first, it felt awkward, like he was a kid learning to read again. But after a few minutes, he noticed something incredible. His reading speed picked up, and he didn't feel the need to say each word in his head. Excited, Ethan muttered, "Wow, this actually works!" The next technique was focusing on blocks of text. The author explained, "If you concentrate on one word at a time, it slows you down. Instead, train your eyes to scan entire sentences or paragraphs as a whole." Ethan flipped to the next page and gave it a shot. Initially, it felt overwhelming, but with a little practice, he could see an entire sentence as one unit. It was like his eyes were skimming, but his brain understood everything. He grinned and thought, "This feels like magic. I'm reading faster, and it all makes sense." Then came the pre-reading strategy. The author broke it down into 4 steps. 1. Read the headings. Start with the titles and subtitles to get a general idea. 2. Focus on key points. Skim the first and last lines of each paragraph. 3. Chunk the text. Break it into manageable sections. 4. Set a purpose. Ask yourself, what am I trying to learn from this? Ethan decided to test this on an office report, a boring, lengthy document he'd been dreading. First, he scanned the headings, then read the opening and closing sentences of each section. Next, he divided the report into 3 parts and reminded himself, "I just need to find the key points and figure out what actions are needed." To his amazement, Ethan finished the report in 20 minutes, a task that usually took him an hour. Feeling triumphant, he thought, "This is like a superpower." But the book had one more crucial reminder. Practice makes these techniques second nature. Ethan realized he couldn't just try these once and expect permanent results. He created a routine. Every morning, he spent 15 minutes practicing speed reading. Starting with old magazine articles, he noticed that his brain processed information faster when he scanned larger chunks of text. Ethan even put up a poster on his wall that read, "Read faster. Understand better." One day at work, his boss handed him a 50-page project report, saying, "I need this analyzed today." For a moment, Ethan panicked. But then he thought, "This is the perfect test for my new skills." He skimmed the report, divided it into sections, and identified the main points using the techniques he'd learned. In just 2 hours, he finished what seemed impossible. When Ethan presented the summary to his boss, the boss looked stunned and asked, "How did you do this so quickly and thoroughly?" Ethan simply smiled and replied, "Just a new way of reading." That evening, Ethan returned to the book, eager to see what the next chapter held. He thought, "Speed reading and memory strategies have already changed my life. What's next?" As he turned the page, little did he know, the next lesson was about to take him even further. Ethan's journey wasn't over, it had only just begun. The next chapter was all about effective note-taking methods. Ethan had already transformed his life with techniques like the memory palace and speed reading. But as fast as he was reading, he realized he was also forgetting things just as quickly. He thought, maybe taking notes is the answer. But wait, he'd been doing that since high school. The same boring lines, bullet points, and endless lists. And honestly, it never felt effective. Then, in the chapter, the author mentioned something that hit Ethan hard. Effective note-taking isn't about writing everything down, it's about organizing information in a way that makes sense to your brain. This was a game-changer. Ethan wasn't just going to read this chapter, he was going to live it. Mind mapping, a detective's notebook. The first technique introduced was mind mapping. The name itself intrigued Ethan. It sounded like something out of a detective movie, connecting clues to solve a big mystery. The author explained, "Mind mapping helps you visually organize information. Start with a central topic in the middle of the page and branch out to related ideas like the branches of a tree." Ethan grabbed his notebook, drew a big circle in the center, and wrote, "Office Project Plan." Then, he created branches, budget, team members, and timeline. Under each branch, smaller sub-branches began to bloom, things like resources and expenses under budget. For the first time, information wasn't just a long, chaotic list. It was clear, structured, and connected. He thought, this isn't just note-taking, it's creating a map for my brain. Adding color, making notes memorable. The author's next advice made perfect sense. Your brain processes images faster than text. Adding colors and visuals to your notes makes them easier to remember. Ethan had a flashback to school when colorful diagrams from his teachers always stuck with him longer. So, he added some flair to his mind map. Budget? Blue. Team members? Green. Timeline? Red. Suddenly, it felt less like work and more like a creative exercise. He smiled as he thought, this feels like playing, but I'm actually remembering so much more. The Cornell method, structure is power. The next technique was something Ethan had never heard of before, the Cornell method. The idea was simple yet brilliant. Divide your page into 3 sections. 1. Notes section for main points. 2. Cue section for keywords or questions. 3. Summary section for a concise recap. Ethan gave it a shot during his next project meeting. In the notes section, he wrote key discussion points. In the cue section, he added keywords like budget issues and deadline adjustments. And finally, in the summary, he wrote a quick overview of the entire meeting. It was like unlocking a new superpower. Ethan thought, my notes aren't just notes anymore, they're tools for action. Using symbols and shortcuts. The author also introduced a time-saving trick, symbols and shortcuts. Why write out every single word when a few symbols could say it all? Ethan began experimenting. He used a star for important points, a question mark for unresolved issues, and an arrow for tasks that needed immediate attention. Suddenly, his notes weren't just faster to write. They were easier to review too. Experiment, adapt, refine. But the most profound advice came toward the end. The best note-taking method is the one that works for you. Experiment, adapt, and refine. Ethan realized this wasn't about blindly following a formula. It was about finding his own style. He decided to mix mind mapping, the Cornell method, and colorful visuals into a system that felt uniquely his. A turning point. Now, whenever Ethan attended a meeting or read an article, his notes were clear, creative, and effective. One day, his boss noticed. Ethan, your notes are so clear and practical. They make my job easier. Would you consider teaching the team your methods? It was a moment of pride for Ethan. He thought, I used to struggle with taking notes. Now I'm helping others do it better. That night, Ethan opened his notebook to the very first mind map he had created. Looking at it, he felt a sense of accomplishment. It wasn't just about learning techniques. It was about transforming how he processed the world around him. Ethan sat at his desk, staring at the mind map he had just created. He felt amazed at how these techniques were reshaping his thought process and work habits. Yet, deep down, he knew this was just the beginning of his journey. Flipping to the next chapter of the Cultivate mindset, Ethan braced himself for what lay ahead. This section of the book felt deeply personal, striking a chord he hadn't expected. Ethan had heard countless times that success depends on your mindset, but he'd never really taken it seriously. However, as he started to see real changes in his life and work, he began to realize this lesson might be exactly what he needed. The chapter began with a bold statement. Your potential is not fixed. It grows with effort, dedication, and a willingness to learn. Ethan froze for a moment, letting the words sink in. He suddenly realized that many of his failures stemmed from his own limiting beliefs. Time and time again, he'd convinced himself that some things were simply beyond his abilities. How often have I given up without even trying? He thought. The book explained that a growth mindset meant seeing every challenge as an opportunity. It didn't guarantee success every time, but it promised one thing: growth. Ethan reflected on those moments at work when he tried to learn new skills but gave up when things got tough. He now saw that it wasn't the difficulty of the task that stopped him. It was his mindset. The author suggested a practical way to develop a growth mindset. Start small with achievable goals. When you set small goals and achieve them, the book said, you reinforce the belief that you can improve. Inspired, Ethan decided to put this advice to the test. He made a list of tasks for the day and chose a simple one, presenting a report at work in a more polished way. This isn't too hard, he told himself. I can handle this if I just focus. By the end of the day, Ethan had not only completed the task but done it well. A wave of satisfaction swept over him. It wasn't a grand achievement, but it felt good. If I can do this, he thought, what else can I accomplish? The book emphasized another important step: celebrate small wins. Celebrating small victories keeps you motivated and reminds you of your potential to grow, it explained. At first, this idea felt a bit silly to Ethan. Why celebrate small things? The real joy comes from achieving something big, he thought. But then he completed another challenging task, a presentation that had made him nervous for weeks. This time, he allowed himself a moment of pride. He jotted down in his notebook, today, I stepped out of my comfort zone, and it felt amazing. To his surprise, acknowledging his progress boosted his confidence. The book also introduced a transformative concept: failure is not the end, it's feedback. When something doesn't work out, the author wrote, ask yourself, what can I learn from this? Ethan thought back to a time when he had interviewed for a promotion but didn't get it. Back then, he had labeled himself a failure, convinced he wasn't good enough. Now, he saw things differently. Maybe I wasn't ready then, he realized. But if I had used that experience to prepare better, the outcome could have been different. Determined to change, Ethan adopted a new habit. Whenever something went wrong, he wrote down what he could learn from it. For instance, when a work project fell behind schedule, he didn't dwell on frustration. Instead, he asked himself, what could I do better next time? Over time, this practice shifted his perspective entirely. One final tip in the chapter stood out: visualize success. Picture yourself succeeding, it said, and your brain will work to make it a reality. Every morning, Ethan closed his eyes and imagined himself achieving his goals. He visualized acing his next promotion interview. He saw himself confidently presenting new ideas in meetings. Surprisingly, this practice gave him a sense of energy and belief that carried into his day. As weeks passed, Ethan noticed something remarkable. Tasks that once intimidated him now excited him. Challenges no longer felt like obstacles but opportunities to grow. For the first time in a long time, he felt in control of his own progress. The journey wasn't easy, but Ethan had learned a powerful truth: your mindset can either hold you back or propel you forward. And with every step he took, Ethan proved to himself that growth wasn't just possible, it was inevitable. Ethan used to see challenges as obstacles. He would often tell himself, if I don't know something today, it doesn't mean I can never learn it. I can learn. All it takes is hard work and patience. One day, his boss assigned him a big project. At first, Ethan was scared. But this time, he told himself, this is an opportunity for growth. If I handle it well, I can learn so much. So, he broke the project down into smaller, manageable tasks and worked on them one by one every day. When Ethan completed the project, not only did his boss praise him, but he also congratulated himself. He thought, this is the power of a growth mindset, the very mindset I learned from a book. That night, as he turned the page to the next chapter, he felt like his thinking and life had both been given a new direction. But this journey wasn't over. He wondered what else he could learn from the next lessons, and the very thought of it excited him. He turned to the next chapter titled Creating an Optimal Learning Environment. At first, it didn't sound too new. He'd heard before that a good study environment is important, but maybe this time, he needed to understand it on a deeper level. The author had written, your learning environment plays a significant role in how effectively you absorb information. A cluttered, noisy space can distract you, while a well-organized, calm space can boost your focus. As soon as Ethan read those words, he looked around his desk. There were books, notes, and old bills scattered everywhere. A cup of tea sat next to his laptop, and everything was just in disarray. He thought to himself, maybe my mind is as cluttered as this room. If this book is right, I need to clear this mess first. He quickly turned to his phone, which was buzzing every minute. This too is a distraction, he thought. He silenced it and placed it in the drawer. Immediately, he felt his mind calm down. The author had also explained how creating a dedicated learning space was essential. Your brain associates specific spaces with specific activities. When you create a dedicated space for learning, your mind automatically switches to that mode. Ethan realized that until now, he'd been studying on his dining table, couch, or sometimes even in bed. Maybe that's why I get tired so quickly, he thought. I need a space that's just for learning. He found a quiet corner in his home, cleared it completely, and only kept the essentials: a lamp, his books, and a notebook. He even placed a small plant on his desk to make it feel fresh. When he looked at this space, it truly felt like a learning zone. The next chapter talked about routines. The author wrote, "A consistent routine prepares your brain for focused work at specific times during the day." Ethan realized he didn't have any routine. Sometimes he studied in the morning, sometimes at night, and that made him unproductive. He decided to set a routine. He would study every morning from 7 to 9 a.m. in his dedicated learning space. He promised himself not to do anything else during that time. On the first day of following this routine, he noticed a difference. His mind felt clearer and more focused. But then, a problem arose: distractions. There was a park near his home where children played, and the noise from the cars was distracting. The book mentioned that background noise could affect focus, but using tools like noise-canceling headphones or calming music could help. Ethan grabbed his old earphones, put on some soothing music, and got to work. The author also talked about keeping materials organized. When your materials are easily accessible and neatly arranged, you can focus entirely on your work. Ethan realized this was so true for him. His desk was always a mess. He organized his books and notes into separate folders, one for work, one for personal goals, and another for learning resources. The moment he did that, he felt more clear-headed and ready to think with focus. The book had one more piece of advice: incorporate elements that make your space enjoyable, like good lighting, a comfortable chair, and even scents that promote relaxation. Ethan decided to upgrade his chair to a more ergonomic one for better comfort. He also placed an aroma diffuser on his desk, filling the air with a gentle lavender scent. These small changes seemed to be boosting his productivity. Slowly but surely, Ethan was learning more than just new skills. He was learning how to live better, how to create the right environment for success. And so, he continued on his journey, each day bringing him one step closer to the person he knew he could become. Ethan had always struggled to focus on his studies. One day, a friend suggested a technique called the Pomodoro technique: break study time into focused intervals, such as 25 minutes of work followed by a 5-minute break. Ethan decided to give it a try. He set a timer on his phone and found that studying in short bursts not only made the work feel easier but also reduced fatigue. Gradually, Ethan created an environment that helped him tap into his full potential. Every day, he entered his learning zone, determined to improve himself. He realized that a well-designed study space could not only make learning easier but also enhance his ability to think critically and solve problems. One evening, as Ethan turned the page of his book, he realized that this journey of learning had become a part of his life. "Let's see what I'll learn next," he thought. Ethan had come a long way, learning everything from memory techniques to creating an optimal learning environment. Each lesson had added something new to his life. But he knew deep down that this was just the beginning. Real change would come when he applied everything he had learned to his everyday life. He picked up his journal and began writing down everything he had learned so far. He thought, "If I write it down correctly, I'll never forget it." As he wrote, he reflected on how the memory palace technique had helped him retain even the most complex information with ease. He promised himself that he would continue refining this technique. The speed reading chapter had also made life much easier for him. Now, he could read faster than ever before, enjoying what once seemed like tedious material. What used to feel like a chore had now become something he genuinely looked forward to. Ethan also started applying what he had learned at work. Techniques like mind mapping and effective note-taking enhanced his presentation skills. His colleagues and even his boss were impressed by his progress. But the most significant change was in his mindset. The growth mindset had taught him that failure didn't mean defeat. Instead, it was an opportunity to learn and grow. He began to see every challenge as a new opportunity to push forward. His potential now felt limitless. All he needed to do was keep improving, one day at a time. The corner of his home that he had turned into his learning zone had become his favorite spot. Every morning, when he sat there, it felt like he had entered a world where his goals and his hard work were the only things that mattered. One day, as he read the last page of his book, he paused. The author, Tansel, had written, "The true power of learning lies not in the techniques themselves but in the commitment to apply them consistently." Reading those words, Ethan realized that learning is a never-ending process, one that is always evolving. He closed the book and gently placed it on the shelf. Taking a deep breath, he reflected on how much more he had gained from this book than just techniques for learning. It had shown him a new way of living. Now, Ethan felt more confident and motivated than ever. He promised himself that his journey wouldn't end here. He would share everything he had learned with others, hoping that one day he could write a book that could change someone else's life. Ethan's journey had started with a book that transformed the way he thought, learned, and lived. He had first learned how to strengthen his memory. Mastering memory techniques helped him organize information in a memory palace, making even the most complex details easier to remember. He applied this technique in both his professional and personal life, effortlessly recalling even the smallest details of big projects. Next, Ethan dove into speed reading. He discovered that speed reading wasn't about quickly flipping through pages, but about absorbing information effectively. He reduced his habit of silently vocalizing each word and began reading in chunks, skimming through text, which helped him read faster and understand more. Complex documents that once seemed overwhelming could now be processed in less time. Tansel also introduced him to effective note-taking methods. Techniques like mind mapping helped him break down large volumes of information into smaller, connected pieces. This not only made it easier for him to retain information, but also helped him see the relationships between different ideas more clearly. Ethan's learning journey had changed his approach to everything, from work to personal growth, laying a foundation for continuous self-improvement. Ethan began organizing his notes in a way that greatly improved his productivity. The lesson on developing a growth mindset was perhaps the most transformative for him. He realized that his failures weren't caused by his lack of ability, but by the way he was thinking. He started seeing every challenge as an opportunity. He understood how important it was to celebrate even the smallest victories and treat failures as valuable lessons. Ethan began writing down every attempt, every progress, in his journal. He stopped letting mistakes hold him back. Instead, he learned from them and kept moving forward. After that, he grasped the importance of an optimal learning environment. He learned that working in a clean and organized space helped him focus better. Ethan carved out a corner in his home dedicated to studying, removing all distractions and creating a positive atmosphere. He balanced short study sessions with breaks, which boosted his focus and productivity. These lessons gradually became a part of Ethan's life, shaping not just his study habits, but his character. He realized that learning was not just about techniques, it was about personal growth. Every day, he was becoming a better version of himself. He understood that learning never truly ends, and the most important parts of this journey were belief in himself and consistent effort. When he read the message on the last page of the book, it clicked. The real power lay in applying these techniques to everyday life. He decided to continue his journey, sharing what he learned with others along the way. Ethan's story didn't end there. Every new day marked the start of a new chapter. So, friends, that was the summary of today's book. What did you think? Let me know in the comments, and thank you for listening until the end.